Good afternoon, New York, and the rest of our listeners around the globe. My name is June Stoyer, and I'm the host of the Organic View Radio Show. Our podcast is available on iTunes, Zune, and you can also visit our website at www.theorganicview.com. If you'd like to be on the show or would like to find out about sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at questions@theorganicview.com. Today's show is sponsored by Eden Foods, the most trusted name in certified organic clean food. When you shop online at EdenFoods.com, enter the coupon code ORGVIEW to receive 20% off any regularly priced items, excluding cases. For other promotional offers, please visit theorganicview.com's website. And don't forget to check out our contest section. On today's show, foodie Stacie Billis from OneHungryMama.com, who's also the managing editor of CoolMomEats, is going to be on the show to talk about her book, Make It Easy, 120 mix and match recipes to cook from scratch. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Stacie Billis. Hello, Stacie, and welcome to the show.
Hi, June. Thank you for having me.
Stacie, how did you become so passionate about food?
Oh, I mean, I've been passionate about food since the beginning. I grew up in a Greek family. So here in the States, in New Jersey, of all places, and, food was always around. And when you grew up in a Greek family, at least, even when things are crazy and people aren't getting along and there's madness, you always get together around the table. That's always the way it was. So my grandmother took care of me when I was growing up. I was always at her feet in the kitchen. Excuse me. So it was just my life. My dad owned restaurants, and I was always in the restaurant kitchen as well, and I just had a natural passion for it. But then my dad told me that I couldn't go to culinary school. He basically forbade me to go into the restaurant business. Because as you can imagine, if you know anything about the restaurant business, it's hard work. And they really wanted something different for me. So I think they all get a kick out of the fact that I ended up coming back to food after going to college and graduate school. So everyone thinks that's very funny that somehow I managed to make my way back.
I can appreciate how difficult it is, but I will say this. For those of you who have ever been in the Northeast, we have the best Greek diners.
Yes,
and the best Greek restaurants.
June, that is so true.
Hands down, you cannot beat the food that you will find. Everything is fresh. All the ingredients. The owners are very particular about where they source their ingredients, and they know that reputation means everything.
Absolutely. And everything's just homemade. You think when you go into a place like a diner that they're just going to be slinging food with no regard. But these were our family businesses. A lot of Greeks run diners here in the Northeast. And so it wasn't just my father's diner that I grew up around. It was other people's as well. And, we knew exactly what was happening in the kitchen, like you said, where the food was coming from, and it was made every day. It was very simple, but inspiring and fresh.
Now, your book is really suited for someone who is just learning how to cook from scratch. What made you decide to write something for that specific target?
Well, June, when I first started, I was a very hardcore organic advocate. Even before I knew what I knew today, I knew enough, and I had my first son, and he was a baby, and I was starting to research about feeding him. And, I was bringing all this background knowledge from the way that I grew up. And I was just really into it. And I was out there, proselytizing, telling people, like, this is what we have to do. Like, we have to be really mindful about what we're putting in our kids' bodies. And the deeper I got into the research, and I'm sure you can relate, I was really inspired, but also very overwhelmed at times, especially thinking about the responsibility I had to feed my kids. And at one point I just thought to myself, if it's still this overwhelming to me, then how must it be for the average mom who wants to, of course, do what's best by her children, but doesn't have the resources and maybe even the passion to go that deeply into the research as I have. So how can I take what I know, what I've learned, and this passion for cooking and this experience growing up in a Greek family where everything is made fresh every single night, It doesn't have to be fancy. And how can I make it easy for parents to do the same in their home so they can just start making smarter decisions? In the parent world, I really feel like there's been this divide. I am so deeply grateful for this conversation around where our food comes from, that it's kind of starting to hit the mainstream, not as much as maybe people like you and me want it to. We always want to push it further. And I'm grateful for the people who are doing that. At the same time, I feel like with parents, it's either, hardcore, everything from scratch, growing food in your backyard, all of these really wonderful movements that just are not accessible to a lot of parents. And those parents who can't do that end up being pushed to this other kind of mentality on the other side of the spectrum of 30-minute meals, no regard for what's going in your food, just grab whatever from the shelf. It'll make dinner only take 15 minutes. In the meantime, what are you putting on your plate for your kids? So I just wanted to find a way to bring everything to the middle a little bit to help sort of introduce people to this idea of cooking from scratch, being a little bit more mindful of what you pull off the supermarket shelf, thinking about organic, making smart choices for your budget, and doing it really, really simply because parents are just so busy these days.
What was the one item that you bought in the store that prior you would have never imagined you would ever buy?
That's a great question.
That has made your life so much easier.
Well, it's funny, and I kind of go in and out of this. Before I had kids, I was taking culinary classes because, like I said, my dad forbade me to do it professionally. But on the side of graduate school, I was taking them. And I was making Thai curry paste from scratch and tortillas from scratch. And then, tortillas became like a go-to thing with my kids. I mean, you can do 1,000 things with them. They're so convenient. And it, even given what I know, sometimes you just have these moments where you're like, hey, wait a minute. I haven't really looked. I haven't really thought deeply enough about this package I'm picking up. And I was really shocked to learn and to discover that it's very difficult to find tortillas, which are really a staple in a lot of family homes. And then tortilla chips on top of it, which are made from the tortillas. It's really hard to find them without preservatives and chemicals. So I've gone back to scratch. But, there's some other things that I rely on. It's getting easier and easier to find some, nut butters. Although when you start thinking about like where the nuts are sourced from, you have to be careful. I have to admit, with two growing boys, 6 and 9, the snacks are really the hardest thing for me to be completely homemade with because they gobble snacks down like crazy. So, always on the search for new, healthier snacks. I do always have granola bars, store-bought and homemade, in my pantry. Gotta admit it. And it's hard because the store-bought are definitely packed with sugar. I have found ones that are all natural. But they tend to be really expensive. So, it's kind of a constant evolution, to be honest, of like what I'm making from scratch, what I'm willing to spend the extra dollars on at the store.
I know with some of the store-bought granola bars, they tend to use a lot of juice to sweeten it, and my body has an adverse reaction to that juice, so it's not something that I can always digest. Granola bars, it's something, I guess it's hit or miss depending upon who makes it and whatnot. For me, the most difficult thing that I had a hard time buying in the store was actually canned tomatoes and pasta sauce. And luckily, Eden Organics makes an amazing line of both the canned tomatoes and pasta sauce. Yep. So I found a lot of comfort in that. And plus, you mentioned in your book about the cans.
Yeah.
A lot of people have no idea how dangerous the canning process is. Could you just take a minute and share some of your findings with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, the cans are a funny thing because The original concern is bisphenol A, right? And this is, I remember my older son is 9.5 years old, and this really blew up right when he was like 6 months old because it's in a lot of hard plastics. So, i.e., baby bottles. So you're pumping breast milk, or maybe you're making formula and you're putting it into bottles that aren't glass. It was in there. It's in baggies. I actually was on the phone one day, just hysterical. Most of our toys were wood, but we had some people give you all kinds of toys and you have stuff around your house that accumulates. I was on the phone with one of the major toy brands for 45 minutes just trying to get an answer about these plastic toys that he put in his mouth all the time because that's what babies do. And, they had the nerve to say to me, well, it's not meant to be a teether or a pacifier, so it should be fine, even though it's manufactured with bisphenol A. So it's really ubiquitous, but the biggest concern is that it's in the linings of our cans for canned food. Now, I don't rely on canned food very much, but a lot of people do. And even people who don't rely on canned food and do a lot of scratch cooking, canned tomatoes are really a staple in the pantry, unless you're canning yourself, which is just a long, arduous process. I'll do it once a year, but it doesn't last me the whole year. And here in the Northeast, we only have tomatoes, good ones, for a few months. So this was a really big concern, and Eden Foods was one of the first brands, as I understand it, to remove bisphenol A from the cans, even for canned tomatoes. The challenge is that when the food is high in acidity, it's harder to remove bisphenol A from the lining. But they managed to do it, and now a lot of other brands are falling in line. I know that Muir Glen, all of the new cans should be bisphenol A free as well. There might be some old cans on the shelves still that have it from 1 or 2 harvests ago, but my understanding is that they've completely transitioned. The question for me, though, is if they're not putting bisphenol A in the cans now, well, what are they putting?
That's true.
And we don't know yet. So, there'll be, I kind of make a tongue-in-cheek joke in the book, like, okay, well, until the next thing, like, here's how to avoid BPA until the next thing. If you can stick with glass, in Europe, there's a lot more glass packaging, and sometimes you can find it here as well. Canned tomatoes, tomato sauce, you can definitely find in glass. That's really the best way to go if you can.
I think especially considering your background and your upbringing, for people such as yourself, and I have the same in common with you as far as the old school way of doing things, it's almost like our standard where we ask ourselves, okay, would our grandmother do something like this? Would our grandmother consume this? And for me, I can my own tomatoes. I highly recommend it. Yeah, it is a lot of work, but it's not so much the work, it's the process, it's the company, it's the memories that you make doing it that are, I think, even more valuable to me. But the end result is always the same. You have something that you can trust. And I think the message that you're giving to our listeners today, Stacie, is that trust is something that not every company offers.
That's right.
They want your money, but what trust are they giving you? They're using any technique possible that, as you pointed out, the consumer may not know about it. So at what point will we know about it?
That's right.
And the companies that are going above and beyond, like the Eden Foods of the world, they're the ones who are stepping up to the plate. They're the ones who understand. And I think because it is a small business that is family-owned, like in Eden Foods, where they take the time to source their food from the right places. They take the time to understand what the process is and anything that could potentially harm the consumer,
yeah,
or anybody that's consuming that product made by the consumer. So it's a very big question that people need to start asking themselves. And when they're in the supermarket, take a look at where these products are being sourced from.
That's right. And, one of the things that I think differentiates my book from a lot of other cookbooks, especially ones geared towards families, is that I have this supermarket guide. Now, I can tell you, June, that a few years ago, I would have never incorporated this because I would have been all about scratch cooking. And of course, inherently a cookbook is about scratch cooking. It's a nudge towards that, right? But I would have really wanted that to be the message. And, as I've sort of shifted my thinking and really have wanted to reach people who may not be aware of this yet, or maybe kind of have an inkling, they've heard, but it's just too intimidating to dig in deep because they're busy, they don't love cooking, they have kids to raise, they're on a tight budget, and there's a perception that to eat organic, you have to, be very wealthy, which we know isn't true. I wanted to include a resource that they could look at. It was a little bit intimidating to come up with a supermarket guide, to be completely frank, because, I take the responsibility of helping parents very, very seriously. And there's so much change in the food industry all the time. There are companies like, Eden that you're mentioning that really something tips in the culture and they get to set a new standard. Even though they're a small company, their good work really starts to change the way big businesses are doing things. You want to acknowledge that, but at the same time, you need to be a little bit skeptical. Also, these big companies are snatching up these small companies, and then you have to wonder, well, are they going to leave these small companies that are values driven to make food the way they've been making food? Or are they going to be gobbled up by the big parent company and be beholden to the bottom line? And when it comes to the bottom line for these big companies that are already tooled to do things their way, my favorite example for parents who think that they have no reason to distrust these big companies is that there are artificial food colorings that are banned. They have been banned for years in Europe. And the same exact companies are manufacturing the same exact product for the European market with natural colors and here with artificial colors. And you think, well, why? It's obviously possible. They obviously have found a way to make it cost efficient. But their factories here are already tooled to do it the way they're doing it. They've already sourced the artificial colors. It takes a lot of money to switch gears when you're a behemoth company and you have multiple factories or what have you going on. So, I wanted to introduce some brands that I knew were doing good here now today. I tell people at the beginning of the supermarket guide, hey, listen, you need to keep your own eyes and ears open because things change very quickly. New brands pop up. Other brands get gobbled up by the big ones. But at least this is a starting place for you guys to start thinking about what it is you're grabbing off the supermarket shelf.
I recall several years back when, I think it was Silk, went from organic to natural practically in the middle of the night.
Yep.
And I received a lot of comments about that on social media. And that was very disappointing. And even with Trader Joe's,
yep,
everything used to be organic. And now you have to really read the labels. Even with their private label products, you have to read the labels because to cut the cost, they're taking shortcuts, and the shortcuts are not necessarily what the consumer wants.
That's right.
The consumer always is going to want something that's inexpensive or the least expensive, but consumers are not stupid. They want what they want, and if they're being deceived, that's a major no-no. That's something that will permanently keep them away from the product from there on out.
Yep, that's right. If they know, when your audience is, the fact that they're listening to you, they're either enlightened or they're wanting to be. So, like you said at the beginning, what I'm really hoping to do with this book, Make It Easy, is help shift for some people. I talk to a lot of people who've been following One Hungry Mama from the beginning. And in some way, on the blog, you're hardcore fans, you're preaching to the choir. You become a resource for people who already get it. And I hear a lot of people say, oh, my cousin just had a baby and, I went over to their house and I can't believe how the kid eats, or my nephew only eats junk food and hot dogs every night. I don't know what to do. So, it's great even if you're an experienced cook, because it really, if you're just busy and you can't cook the way you hope to cook every single night, it's a great resource. But also, grab a copy and give it to that friend or that cousin or that, your sister who just hasn't gotten there yet with food and, maybe thinks you're a little bit extreme, but is curious. This is just an easy foray into thinking about these things that we all care about so deeply.
I think for myself, one of the things that I found to be very effective when trying to get kids to participate in the meal preparation or even the selection is to have a conversation with them. It doesn't matter how old they are, whether they're in elementary school or even kindergarten. Ask them what they like.
That's so
Get
true.
them involved. Give them a little task, whether it's to hold a can with a can opener, and I did that to a 3-year-old nephew of mine a couple of years back, and he held on to that can opener as though that was the most important thing next to his toy truck. And he took so much pride in just the little basic things that I asked him to do, and it's amazing how kids take so much pride when you give them little tasks and you get them involved in the process. And it's amazing for the kids that just want to eat hot dogs or chicken nuggets, what have you. If you take the time to get them involved, sometimes if they take ownership, that's when their decision-making will take on a new level.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, it's not just about what their friends are eating. I remember I had another family member who, after going to school, would not eat anything green.
Yeah.
And it was very frustrating because, so many amazing vegetables are green, of course, and I guess there was a kid at school that did not want to eat anything green and said, oh, green foods are bad. So it was a challenge, but inevitably I got him involved with the food making process, and then he began to incorporate more green vegetables, which it can be a very big challenge.
I mean, this is shown over and over again. Edible Schoolyard is a program that started out in Berkeley and now is in New York City, and I went to visit them. And, a lot of the children who were at the program that I visited, I don't know if this is true across all of them, but were from homes, lower income homes, were eating a lot of fast food, were coming in with school lunches that, weren't particularly nutrition packed. And these kids, over the course of the school year, just having a garden at their school, taking responsibility, for the garden, picking the vegetables and then cooking with it. What ended up happening is the educators were telling me that the parents were coming in and saying, hey, can you give us more resources? Because the kids were going home and educating the parents on healthier food. And that just goes to show you the power that has. And then also that once the kids are convinced, the parents get on board, because parents really do. Most parents want to do what's right by their kid. They really do. And when you get that family where they just eat hot dogs, that's not a bad mom or a bad dad. That's just a tough situation where, they're stressed out, the kid demands it, and, they don't know how to go about it. They don't know what you're saying, just give the kid a responsibility, let them pick a meal, have them help cook. But those little things make a huge difference.
I just want to comment about a Snapchat that you recorded with your son, and I thought it was priceless because your son is making a noodle dish, and you could tell that he was having a blast. And I think if more parents recognize that this can be a fun activity that would also help tire them out, they just might find that they have some new helpers that are ready and waiting to get involved.
It's so true. My kids they're great eaters. I admit it. But the older one, I've made them that, though. I'll say that too, that we all have the power to do that. My older one came by it more naturally. The little one, I would have described him as a picky eater a few years ago. He's 6 now, but I just stayed on him. I mean, it's a very Greek thing to do. You eat what I put on the table, and if you're not hungry or you won't eat this, okay, you can go get your pajamas on and wait for me upstairs. That's very Greek. That's how I grew up, and I feel comfortable doing that. And now, even though he's a selective eater, we went to a restaurant recently and he couldn't find anything he liked on the menu. So he was like, oh, can I just have smoothie and a side of fruit? Like, those are his choices, because it's plain. He just likes plain things, but raw vegetables are plain. But one of the things he doesn't like is zucchini. And once a week, my boys are responsible for making dinner. This is a new tradition. We just started it a couple of weeks ago. And I am trying to share it on Snapchat more to get people to see that this is possible. 2 crazy fighting boys, and I'm giving them chef's knives. And it works, somehow. But I gave them a vegan cookbook as their resource, just because it's easier. I don't want them dealing with meat right now. We do eat meat in our house. It's pretty limited. But it's just like that's a whole other level of cooking that I don't think they're quite ready for. So he picked this pasta recipe because it looked really plain, and it's just pasta with zucchini ribbons and carrot ribbons. And man, that kid ate that zucchini so fast, even I couldn't believe it, knowing everything that I know about this. If you get them involved, they do it. It's fun. He was proud, and he was like, now his new thing is, I only like zucchini the way I cook it.
So the zucchini ribbon process was effective. I was going to suggest have him take the zucchini and make pasta out of it. And most kids, they're just so thrilled about the shape.
Yeah.
And I found that some of the different tools that are available in the kitchen to make, or rather to transform fruits and vegetables into different shapes is really something that's very appetizing to kids.
It's so powerful. I mean, I think in some ways, I'm going to sound really Greek when I say this, we give kids a little too much credit. I mean, they're smart, they're brilliant, they're wildly creative, and I learn from my kids every single day. They teach me stuff. But, when it comes to food, switching up presentation, just getting them involved so they feel proud. These very simple things can switch their behaviors in really powerful ways.
Speaking of which, what is your favorite kitchen gadget?
Well, I do have a spiralizer, and that you were talking about turning zucchini into noodles. So I love that just because it really does make a huge difference with the kids. What else do I love? I love my microplanes, because I like tools that help busy cooks go faster, even when you cheat. So, if you go to culinary school, it used to be at least. Now I know there are more sophisticated tools, although they also cost more. It used to be never use a garlic press. It breaks down the cell wall, which releases juices, which makes the garlic bitter. But if you're going to cook garlic, like in a tomato sauce, you're trying to make an Italian-style tomato sauce, that will go away. Just like, what's fastest? You don't have to sit there laboring over a perfect, mince. Just grab your microplane and just grate that garlic right in there. I also love it for turmeric and ginger and adding those really nutrient-rich roots and what are they called? Rhizomes into smoothies. And it just makes it really fast. It's just a fast way to chop, basically. And I find that chopping is really what slows beginner cooks down the most. So anything that helps people just chop faster, microplane, mandolin, those kinds of tools, even kitchen shears, I love that.
My last quick question for you, it's in regards to the section that you devoted to tortillas. You mentioned it earlier in the interview, but do you have any tips for new chefs and also seasoned chefs that are not familiar with making their own homemade tortillas from scratch?
I went to Mexico City right as I got this book deal, and I love Mexican food. And I was like, I'm going to learn how to make the perfect tortilla. It's going to be so wonderful. And, I got there and I should have known this, June, because you and I know this thing. It's all about your local ingredients, right? It's all about the water. What's the mineral in the water and the specific salt that they have in Mexico and all these things where I realized, okay, well, I'm going to make the second best tortilla in the world. Maybe not the first best. They're really simple to do. It's just really making sure that you get it thin enough. I have to say, I give directions in the book for using a rolling pin because I'm really loath to suggest that people go get super specialized kitchen tools. Like, who has the room and who wants to spend the money on a tool that does one thing and you're only going to use it twice a year? But I will tell you, they're not so expensive. And a tortilla press, if you're interested in making tortillas, really does make things so much easier and faster.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's worth the fairly minor investment, I'd say, if you're interested in doing it.
And you could use it for other things, too.
Yeah, you can, actually. You can. Sometimes it takes being in the kitchen a lot to realize how you can use your tools in different ways. But yeah.
As long as no one uses my good flatware in place of a screwdriver, I'm open.
I love it. I'm pretty particular about my knives. I do have to say that. Like, you can only, stay away from my knives. When I see my kids starting to smash the garlic or scrape the cutting board, scrape what's on the cutting board off into a bowl using the sharp edge, no. I'm very particular about my knives, but everything else, like you.
Stacie, you are such a joy to talk to. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. And can you share your website with our listeners?
I would love to. So you can always find me on onehungrymama.com. That's O-N-E, hungry, M-A-M-A. And I'm also managing editor of a really wonderful site where I work with the most wonderful family food writers called CoolMomEats. So just like it sounds, CoolMomEats.com. On my website, you can find where to find my book if you feel like picking up Make It Easy. And on social media, I'm One Hungry Mama everywhere. So that's on Twitter, Facebook.com/OneHungryMama. I'm One Hungry Mama on Snapchat. I'm One Hungry Mama on Instagram. It's crazy how much social media we have, but there you go. Whatever you follow, look for me there. One Hungry Mama.
Thank you, Stacie.
Thanks, June. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. And folks, in case you did not have a chance to jot all of those different websites down, there will be a companion article with 2 of Stacie's recipes on theorganicview.com. So please be on the lookout for that. Once again, Stacie, thank you so much for joining me today. And folks, thank you for tuning in. This has been June Stoyer with the Organic View Radio Show. Have a great afternoon.